You load up the game and decide it might be a good time to practice some new movements. Maybe refine already learned ones. After 30 minutes of frustratingly tapping on your keyboard, which seems like it was 30 hours, you come to the realization you've made no discernible progress. The movement is just as difficult as when you started, you still flub at the same parts, and you find yourself periodically doing random movements you've already mastered. Frustrated, and deciding that your practice session was long enough, you log out and go watch anime on Netflix. Only to feel guilty, and you load the game back up to practice more. Rinse and repeat. Not that, I have any experience with that. It's purely hypothetical. Guns is a difficult game. Trying to learn how to kiss style is harder. But the hardest part about it isn't anything about the game itself. After all, almost everything takes skill to get good at. Now, the hardest part about getting good is learning. When the skill is learned, it means that we have efficiently encoded, stored the information, and the goal is typically to be able to unconsciously recall it impromptu. To optimize learning, we must first need to be diligent on how we encode the information. Training. The bad news is that all people need to come to terms with when they want to improve at a skill is that taking the time to devote to doing the thing that they want to get better at won't make them better. Sure, familiarizing yourself with the field may yield some marks of improvement, but if a person wants to optimize their growth, then what's necessary is training. But just taking the time to devote to doing is not training. Training is meant to be a special time with a specific mindset. That is to say, the focus for the time that you devote must be framed around a specific goal you wish to achieve. Once you have a goal set, then that time that you devote should only be filled with actions and thoughts regarding reaching that goal. For instance, I would devote 30 minutes to achieve a crisp half-half step. Then for 30 minutes, I would practice doing half-half step and only half-half step. Don't do butterflies around the map, or breaking into reload shots, or start discussing which anime girl is best girl in chat, again completely hypothetical because we all know it's Asin from K-On! Training is deliberate and consciously directed effort into achieving a goal. It's literally a time you set to improve. Anything other than that is not training. Setting a goal. Figuring out what goals you wish to achieve is a task in itself. After all, we all want to be able to GDHS and get frame-perfect triple butterflies. However, setting our sights on how to run before we walk is bound to set us up for failure. Goals should be specific, but attainable. If a person has never played guns before and they're just starting day one, then setting a goal to learn to double butterfly is not going to help improve. The task is unattainable, and thus they can't mark any progression at all. We need to lower the bar to our expectations and ground ourselves in reality. Before we learn double butterfly, we need to learn the butterfly. Before that, we need to learn about animation cancels, which you can see in my previous video, hint hint, nudge nudge, link in the description below. A good goal for a newcomer would be learning to jump and then dash consistently in seamless movement in every direction. This will show clear steps of how to achieve that goal, and if any difficulties arise, to highlight what exactly is causing the problem in completing the task. Once we've learned to generally master our goal, we can move on to more complex movements. Practice makes better, not perfect. A movement done incorrectly is worse than not doing it at all. For that reason, you should remember that practice makes better, not perfect. Any movement you attempt to perform over and over again will build muscle memory. If you practice the wrong inputs and the wrong timing, you will build incorrect muscle memory. Trying to unlearn bad habits is a difficult thing in itself, and adds another step into trying to learn the correct way to do something. As the saying goes, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Consistency. Improvement is a marathon, not a sprint. What may be hard for you now will be easier in the future. Guns is a difficult game. You may get discouraged by dying over and over again, and the ache of their hands due to fatigue. But if you keep consistent with your training, you will improve. The key word is consistency. 15 minutes a day for a week of directed conscious training is significantly better than 2 hours in just one day every week. Muscle memory is about continuous repetition. The more breaks you take in between your training sessions, the longer and worse your muscle memory will be. It will take a long time to be proficient at the game, but if you stick with it, you will improve and you'll be able to compete. Conceptualization. Being able to mentally visualize the technique is necessary to correctly perform it. Without first conceptualizing a technique, you are just mindlessly button mashing. You're not learning any of the information because there's actually no relevant information being received. The pattern of inputs on the keyboard or controller, the tactile motion of the body, and what it looks like at full speed is all part of conceptualization. The more ways you can conceptualize the technique, the easier it will be to refine mistakes and build good muscle memory. You need to be deliberate with your actions. In guns, when we're attempting to learn the butterfly, it's easy to think that all you need to do is practice the sequence of jump, dash, slash, and block. However, this is not going to help you get better. When a movement is hard, it means we have a basic difficulty understanding the parts. Sure, you maybe understand that jump, dash, slash, block is butterfly, and that it allows us to attack, defend, and move at the same time. But the purpose of learning is to be able to, on command, jump to dash, dash to slash, slash to block, block to jump, and so on. You shouldn't be learning just to be able to butterfly, but to be able to, at any time, do any of those sequence of moves. By just learning to butterfly, you're no better at guns in the long term. Start slow. Now that you have a goal, and you're practicing, you may want to do everything exactly like you see others do it, or in videos. However, every movement has a specific sequence of actions, some that require precise timing to correctly execute. If you attempt to do a movement at full speed, then you won't be able to assess what part of the move is causing specific difficulties. The reason why we make technical errors is also because our body isn't used to the motions. As we repeat the same motion over and over, more of our muscle fibers are recruited. Thus, we become more efficient at the same motion as we're literally unlocking more of the muscle fibers, which will make us more dexterous and precise. Figuratively, we're leveling up. This is the same principle as strength training in weightlifting. Playing slowly isn't just about preventing unnecessary failure points, but it puts into practice deliberation. As if you play fast, then a bunch of mistakes that you normally would make playing slowly aren't seen. Adam Neely, a musician and YouTuber, has a great video on this topic. Link in the description below. Associate. Knowledge is exponential. The more you know and the more you have learned, the easier it becomes to be able to learn other skills. To optimize your learning, you should attempt to relate difficult parts to knowledge you've already possessed. For example, I very much conceptualize a lot of information through the lens of fighting games, or through knowledge I've gained through what I've learned in the medical field. While it may seem silly to relate seemingly incompatible areas in your life together, you might find that what you have already learned can relate highly to what you're attempting to learn. The way that you gain competency in the area is irrelevant as long as you're learning the information correctly. Not all things in one area will relate to another, but the information that does overlap will allow you to accelerate your ability to learn. So whether it be baking, music, water polo, or whatever, the easier it is for you to conceptualize and intake, the better. It doesn't matter from where it comes from. Chunking, a psychology term that means to package multiple related complex ideas into a simpler, easy, identifiable whole. There are undoubtedly more difficult parts of movements than others. However, what may cause one person to fail at correctly executing a movement may be easy for another. Some people may have an easier time at getting delayed inputs, while other persons may have an easier time with quick successions. For this reason, you should be trying to dissect the movement into parts, and then focusing on what steps are giving you the most difficulty. If you have parts of the movement down, then you don't need to worry about those. You can choose to skip over them, so you can focus strictly on the steps that cause you to flub. Once the steps that cause you trouble are ironed out, you may start focusing on executing the movement as a whole. The reason why we practice and focus on certain movements is because it helps us navigate the game in a more efficient way. However, it's equally important to realize that just learning the movements themselves isn't the end goal. For instance, in Super Smash Bros. Melee, the simplest advanced technique called wave shining is what we call the result of the inputs jump, stick diagonal, air dodge, down, B, jump, stick diagonal, air dodge. Wave shining is just a chunked concept of two different techniques together. The first is down B is what we call a shine, which is a chunked concept itself. And 2, jump, stick diagonal, air dodge is called a wave dash. There's technically no limit to how many complex ideas you can chunk. Experts in any skill, however, have chunked almost all information of the respective fields. Chunking is not just delegated to tech skill. All things can be chunked, and you'll find that the reason why top-level players do not get caught off guard, have impeccable neutral and disadvantage games, is that they have already chunked conceptual or abstract situations. For instance, being pushed back into a corner with the opponent having to come around to follow you will be chunked, as will the concepts of whatever responses to those situations will be. Friendlies versus tournament matches. One of the biggest mistakes newcomers make is not understanding the value of playing friendlies. Every time you play friendlies, the goal should never be to win the match, but rather to experiment and implement ideas you want to improve on. It's equally important to ask your opponent to attempt to set up situations within the game that will help you refine those ideas. Any goals you make should be micro goals and very specific. Tournaments and tests are meant for you to take the collective experience you have and implement them in however you can, to overcome the collective experience your opponent has into context to the rule sets you're playing against. This also includes implementing techniques to learn. Playing against varying skilled players. As you practice, you should also be practicing against every skill level of players relative to your current skill level, lower, even, and higher. However, you should not be practicing the same way. For each respective skill level, you should be focusing on developing certain things. Against lower skill levels. Here, you'll want to practice being bold and creative. The reason for this is that lower skill levels do not have the adequate knowledge or tech skill to respond to your actions efficiently. It's a great way to hone yourself and take more risks and unconventional approaches to every aspect of your gameplay. You are not practicing efficiency. You're practicing creativity and outside-the-box thinking, whether it be neutral, disadvantage, or advantage. You may find concepts that will be interesting and will prompt the, if this works here against this player, can I use it somehow against stronger players? Of course, you'll have to remember to go out and test those things to confirm if you can. Against even skill levels. Since both of you will have roughly the same skill level in knowledge and tech skill, you'll want to be focusing on honing your neutral and punish game. You want to apply your fundamentals crisply and make sure that everything you do, you're getting the most out of it. This is a good way to benchmark what you have learned and what you want to learn, and what you need to learn. Even skilled opponents will allow you to apply concepts you've learned while not overwhelming you with more knowledge or tech skill, making you feel hopeless. Don't forget to practice reads, predictions, and conditioning. Against higher skill levels. Those who play against better players will improve certain skill sets dramatically faster compared to those who only play against similarly or lower skilled players. This is because you'll be forced to develop your gameplay to mitigate the vast skill gap. Whether it be a refined disadvantage game, habit recognition and conditioning methods, or sheer faster gameplay, you'll eventually improve due to necessity. It will be incredibly hard in the beginning, as matches will feel one-sided, almost as if you don't get to play the game at all. Eventually, if you implement the above knowledge and keep playing, you'll wind up leveling up immensely, by necessity. Reviewing VODs. When proofreading essays to fix grammatical and spelling errors, or revisiting arguments, the best ways are to 1. Read the essay out loud to yourself, and 2. Have someone else review it. Reading the essay out loud brings internal thoughts outwards and makes us more aware of things we missed due to autopiloting. Having someone else review our essay gives us another perspective for clarification. Average human memory is pretty terrible. A lot of things go wrong in the process of memory. Distractions preventing encoding, poor storage due to not focusing on explicit movements, or bad recall due to inadequate discrimination of like situations. This is the same reason you should record yourself and analyze your gameplay. It allows you to take a third-person look at you and your opponent's decisions. In the heat of the moment, it's very hard to tell whether or not you're making mistakes. This is fine, and it shouldn't discourage you, as everyone, even at the top level, makes mistakes. The difference is that the awareness of what's being done right and what's being done wrong, and the subsequent remedying of any issues that arise. Additionally, reviewing your VODs will help you create solid and worthwhile goals the next time you train. Things that you may have thought you needed to work on are not the most important factors that will help you improve, and things that you think are beneficial can be just highly contextual actions that shouldn't be fundamentally part of your game plan. So review your VODs and write notes. Try to remember what you were thinking in key moments, such as choosing an option on approach, or a response while getting punished, times when you reset back to neutral, when your opponent was able to return back to neutral, and then the emotion it made you feel. Then, assess your notes that you took while looking back at the VODs, and attempt to find other moments that you have missed in the first viewing. Now you will be able to have a good idea of your habits, tendencies, feelings, strengths, areas of weaknesses, and areas of improvement, You can then modify your goals for next training. Resting. There's one huge aspect to improvement that many people don't realize, and that's knowing when to stop practicing and when to rest. It's easy to get absorbed playing and practicing hours on end with minimal breaks in between. You might find yourself in a long practice session, but as you keep practicing, you'll find that your execution becomes more and more inconsistent. Why is this? After all, with practice, you hone your skills to be able to be better than previously. Remember that athletes strain their body when practicing. Video games are no different. It's just that we're using different muscle groups. There are only so much work you can put your body through before it becomes fatigued. When you find this happening, it's best to stop because your body is tired. Likewise, it might not be just your muscles, but your mind. Your brain is like a muscle too, and it gets fatigued. That's why intense game or learning something new can feel absolutely exhausting. You're using the capacity of yourself, and there's only so much it can handle before becoming tired. You shouldn't practice longer than your attention can handle. If you feel like you're losing focus, then stop and take a break. You need to let your body and mind internalize what you've learned. If you feel any pain at all, stop immediately. Pain is a sign that your body is uncomfortable, and you should listen and rest. Be sure to do hand and wrist stretches and exercises. Good health. One of the most overlooked and underrepresented facets to being a better player is to take care of your physical and mental health. The reason why this advice of taking care of your body and mind isn't really discussed is that it seems so divorced from video games. After all, it's not like we're athletes, right? We see a bunch of high-level esport pros that are less than physically fit. So, if physical fitness isn't a requirement, why should we be devoting time to good physical health when that time could be used for practicing our gaming skills? Even though, yes, video games are not as physically demanding as traditional sports in a holistic sense, there's still a large amount of physicality to our hobby. While it may seem that the muscles that we use are in a smaller scale, such as fingers and wrists, they function the same way as any other muscle. There's no physiological difference between how the muscles used to control our fingers work versus how our biceps, quads, or abdominal muscles work. If we want to optimize how we both physically play, then being good physical shape will benefit us. Not only physically, but mentally too. Taking care of our body is also taking care of our mind. The benefits of improved attention and focus, decision making, and mood regulation through physical fitness has been overwhelmingly scientific proof to it. Though the brain isn't technically a muscle like the ones that control our skeletal structure, it becomes more efficient in a very much the same way: stimulation, rest, and nutrition. If you really want to optimize your improvement, you'll take care of your body. The trifecta is exercise. If there's anything that will help your physical and mental performance, it's exercise. Particularly aerobic cardiovascular activities such as jogging. Just a 10 to 15 minute jog per day will significantly improve your quality of life. If not now, in the future. Those who are 60 years old that jog and run regularly have the cardiovascular and pulmonary systems, that is the heart, lungs, and circulations, of a 40-year-old. Good sleep. Sleeping is super important for the chemical regulation, physical maintenance, regeneration, and muscle development in all facets of memory. Hydration. Most people fail to be properly hydrated. I know that hydration has become somewhat of a meme, but actually it's really important. One of the most specific advice I give to people is to make sure to drink water before going to bed and immediately after you use the restroom after waking up. We get dehydrated as we sleep, and so to prevent this, we drink water before and to ensure that we start the day well hydrated. This is particularly important if you, like me, drink a lot of coffee, as caffeine is a diuretic. If we want our bodies and minds to execute, we need to give it proper fuel. It requires specific tolerance of vitamins, minerals, carbs, fats, and proteins. You wouldn't put dirty water in your car's gas tank and expect it to start, let alone drive you to work. Mindset, talent versus practice. While there are people that seem to have indisputable affinities to certain things, the fact is that talent isn't a factor unless it's at the top level of play. Most of the time, the reason why a person isn't improving is because they're not dedicating the time needed to improve. They're not training efficiently, or even at all. And it's so easy to make excuses and to be dishonest. But the truth is that hard work and practice will get you at least mid-level. Something that has always inspired me is this. It's a paintball that's over 2 tons. What does a ball of paint have to do with improvement? Well, it took 40 plus years to paint a baseball over and over again until it got to its size today. Easy enough, but think about it. More than 25,000 coats of paint. This man painted a layer. He had to wait for it to dry to even think about applying the next layer. It probably took years for a notable change in size. Practice and training is not immediately cash-inable, as in a lot of people will practice really intensely for weeks, and while they find minor improvements, they feel like the amount of effort they put in does not reflect in the gameplay. A hard pill to swallow is that practice is not immediately or even yearly visible. In fact, training and practicing is truly noticeable years after. Good habits stick on and on each other. You may say that you practice for months. That's like what, 50, 60 coats of paint? You still have 24,950 coats to go. Keep at it. Be diligent. Eventually, you'll get there, but you have to remember that change is hardly visible because it becomes a habit. And while ourselves may not see it, others will. And eventually, so will we. Having fun. The most important factors to improving is actually enjoyment. It's having fun. The reason why some things in life are so difficult to do, even though they may be simple tasks like washing the dishes, mowing the lawn, or taking out the garbage, is because it's so unenjoyable and inconvenient. Having fun is imperative to improvement, because without enjoyment, the pursuit is unsustainable. It's great to just take some time to experience everything the game has to offer, to try things out just because it's fun or interesting. Go for it! Sometimes being good is overrated. Sometimes improvement is overrated. What's the point of doing a hobby if you're not happy with it? I hope these tips will help you improve. The things that I've learned through playing different video games throughout my life. They're not explicitly for video games. All of these tips are applicable to other pursuits of life, no matter what the field it may be. Regardless, whatever you use these tips for will certainly be helpful to improve.